Hi, my name is Kyle. I'm here to talk to you about Combat Manager. Combat Manager is a tool designed to make your life easier as a GM in Pathfinder by reducing the amount of steps you have to take. We're going to talk about the main page today. So let's get into that. So here we've got the Combat Manager home, and we're just gonna take a few steps through this. So up in the upper corner here, you see that there is a little button. This is kind of the menu button. There are a number of options here. Exit. We'll deal with those. We'll deal with those later. Across the top, you have a series of tabs. We're going to be dealing with just the combat tab today. That's the most complex and the most important of the tabs. You've got some information about the current game state right here, and a few different panels. One thing to note real quick is that you can drag these panels around or resize them and reposition them as you need to. This is just kind of like the default position. If things get really messed up and you're a little worried about the setup, just go over to up to here and restore combat tab layout, and that'll restore to the default layout. This area right here, like I said, this is where you're going to spend most of your time. This is the main combat area. Let's first deal with these tabs that say Party and Monster. These are the sections where the friendly and enemy characters appear. It doesn't really matter if Party or Monster for how the rules or how the turn order or how anything works there. There's a couple of things that can only be linked together if they're in the same column, but honestly, these are largely similar areas. One of the philosophies involved with Combat Manager is that you can kind of do things without having to have all the information right away. So that way, you have your choice whether or not to put in a ton of information or a little bit of information to get started. Let's say you wanted to start off a basic combat. You can just go over here to this plus, and you can just add some blank party members. So now we've got 4 party members in the party. We can give these party members names. And now we have a 1970s movie. So you'll notice that there's just some very basic stats on those characters. This is kind of like the basic mode without really entering any information. You can manually set the maximum hit points for each of the characters right here. And you'll notice the little yellow bar right here under their name. That represents that because their hit points are already set at 5. That's kind of representing how much health they have. Now, even then, you don't even need to enter that information if you don't want to. So the most important function that Combat Manager has is going to be rolling initiative. The most core thing that it does, the thing that it does, if nothing else. So if we go over here, we see the initiative modifiers for each of the characters. And you can just manually set all of these modifiers however you want. And now you've got 4 characters with initiatives. So now we've got a very basic bare bones party set up. Let's say we want them to fight somebody. So now we can get some monsters. Now we can do the same thing we did right here, and we can add a blank monster. And give him, this is in mini mode, we can give him some hit points. Or we can go over down here to this panel that's on the lower right, where it says Monster DB. This is a real quick lookup for any particular monster. So let's say we want to add a kobold to combat. I type kobold, and it gives me all the various kobold named monsters that it has in the database. I just want a basic kobold. I can double click on that guy, or I can press the add button with his name highlighted, and we'll have kobolds. And so there's kobold number 1. They'll always have a number attached to the back of them as they get added, assuming that number is not taken. Kobold 2. If I rename this guy to kobold 15, then the next kobold will be kobold 1 again. So now we've got some kobolds. They have 5 hit points. Now with these kobolds, because they came out of the database, over here we have a little window. So there are two tabs in this window: current monster and selected monster. Selected monster is whoever you have just most recently clicked on over here. And current monster is when we deal with initiative, whoever's turn it is. So when we click kobold, we see the stats block for the kobolds as in the bestiary. And this gives us all the information we might need to know about a kobold in order to use one of them in combat. If you'll notice underneath the monsters here, there's a little CR, right? So what's going to happen is that all the CRs of all these monsters, and we have all the information from the database right here, all this is going to add up using the rules, and it's going to give us the estimated CR level of the encounter and the amount of experience involved in the encounter. Now that we have all these guys, we're ready to fight. So we can go over here, and we have a few different options. The thing that I recommend, we're looking at the panel on the far left over here. Now you notice everybody is already on the panel. This is kind of like they're just added in the order that, sort of the order they appear. Like I said, you have a couple of options. The option that I recommend is using the roll initiative button. So if I press this button right now, initiative will be rolled for everybody, and we see the final results of the initiative right here. And it also brings us to the beginning of combat. You'll notice that we have an active character right here, which is Carol. She had the highest initiative, and we're round 1. If there are ties, there are systems for breaking ties, which are internally used. Normal tiebreakers are used, and then internal stuff is used to break ties, like in the rules. There is some slight variation just involved in trying to keep it from rolling a million times, but basically it's the same as the rules. That's the most basic option, using the roll initiative button. This is the fastest option. I find that players get used to the roll initiative setup rather quickly. I don't think it's worth having the players roll their initiative manually. But some people won't ever leave the roll initiative. So the other option is that you can have all the players roll their own initiative, and then you just enter the numbers in for everybody over here. Right? So after that's done, you press the sort button, and you'll have all the monsters sorted in the order that those numbers came up. If you want to do a partial initiative roll and have the players do their own, what you can do is roll initiative and then go through and get all the players' numbers. And then click the sort button, and it'll work that out. Obviously, if you get the players' numbers first and then you press the roll button, you'll lose everything. And there's no way to not roll initiative for some players. So if you want to do that, make sure you roll and then get the players' initiative numbers, or you'll have to ask them again. If you want to reset all the numbers, we've got a reset to 0 here. You'll notice once again here that active player is Carol, round number is 1. If you want to go back to the beginning of combat at any point, you can press reset, and the round of combat will reset, and then as soon as you press next, it will give you the next number. So what I just skipped through really quickly here, though, is the turns. Okay, so we start off with, it's Carol's turn, it's round 1, and the number is just there to help you keep track of what combat round it is in combat. Every time you want to move to the next player, you just press the next button and it moves down. It's just that simple. If you need to go back, you press previous and it can roll back as far as you feel like, as many negative rounds as you feel like. It doesn't care. It's just a number. It doesn't matter. It's just there. The round number is just for your record keeping. There's a lot of different things that you might want to do during combat. Clicking on a character in the combat list, or over here, or clicking on this little red die next to everybody's names will get you the menu. The first thing we're going to talk about, because we're talking about initiative, is some of the actions for the initiative. Oftentimes there are a couple of things that you need to do with a character in combat. Okay, first if you need to move them up and down the initiative chart, okay, select the name over here, and you can use these arrows right here to move them up and down. When you move a character outside of their original initiative position, the initiative number becomes yellow just to know that you've moved them at some point. That's about all that does. If you ever re-roll initiative, this will clear up. Normally, though, if you're going to move someone around the initiative chart, you're going to do it, for reasons. So one thing you can do is two standard actions you can use are delay. So if you click delay, you'll see this hourglass next to the person's name. This hourglass will go away as soon as their turn comes up. So let's say that Bob needs to delay until after Carol goes. I will go down here. I will use delay on Bob. I will move Bob down below Carol, and then when Bob comes up, it's Bob's turn. And of course, Bob will stay in that initiative position. Another option you can use is to ready, and this little red marker indicates that you've readied an action. As we go along, before your next turn comes up, you want to act now. It's like Kobold 15 right here. You click on Bob, you click Act Now, and Bob will move down in front of the Kobold, and his flags will be cleared up. And so then it's Bob's action. So that's how you move the characters around the initiative chart as you need to. You can roll initiative for any one particular character at any time. So let's just say I want to roll Kobold's initiative. I can go down to the initiative in groups, roll initiative, and it'll roll and place him on the correct place in the chart. Now, one of the more complicated things you might want to do is have all of a certain character act together. So let's say you want all the kobolds to act together. There's a couple things you can do. Okay, first, select a kobold, go to initiative in groups, go to link initiative with, and then select the other monster you wanted to group with. You'll notice that there's a lock on that monster. Okay, I'm going to unlink him just so you can see something else. Okay, I'm going to link number 2 here. Link initiative with 1. You notice there's a lock here, and he's suddenly below the other guy in the chart. Okay, so that indicates everybody below them on the chart is linked. And if you look at the initiative chart, you'll notice that there's only one initiative entry. It's the initiative entry for the first guy, and then anybody else is below them. Okay, this allows you to roll one initiative number for several monsters and have them act on the exact same turn. Anything that's going on with them will go on at the same turn. You can unlink them at any time if you want to. This is kind of a convenience for when you're dealing with very large numbers of monsters, such that you can reduce the amount of dice rolling, and the number of different turns you take. So one possibility would be if you had 5 kobold archers, and they were all shooting at one target, you could just have all 5 at one place. They all roll all 5 of their attacks together and resolve things. You can link more than one guy to somebody, so I can link initiative. And I can't link with anybody who's already linked somewhere. There's no nested groups, but I can link 2 guys to Kobold 1. I can go in here, I can unlink, and you notice it drops down, and there we go. Now let's say you want one big group. I take this, I click Control to select 3 different guys. Initiative in groups, group all selected characters, and it chooses the top guy to make the boss, and everybody else links below him. And we got a group, and that's a real quick way to group 3 characters. You can group players as well. They're not treated differently in that regard. Let's talk about a couple other options. Idle character and hide character. We'll talk about hide character a little bit later, but idle character just allows you to shut somebody off. Idle character just simply does not appear in the initiative window. When their turn would come up, their turn is skipped. If people are wondering, internally, the combat manager keeps track of what turn it is based on a number, which is the current initiative. these guys have moved around. They still have a kind of like an internal current initiative count number. And the next sub number is described as the modifier number, and it's based on the original modifier. And then there's kind of like a tiebreaker number. And as characters are moved around, they're moved ahead of and behind those numbers. That's just kind of some internal stuff going on there. So that's idling a character. Hiding a character doesn't change whether or not they are in combat, but that'll matter a little bit later. So let's talk about conditions. So there are a lot of different conditions that can come up in Pathfinder. The four, what I considered, what I believe were the four most common conditions are kind of right here. So by default. So you can add condition, and you can just add one of these conditions. There'll also be a most recently used condition list, and that'll apply that condition to a character. So now Ted is prone. Now these conditions will modify the stats when we talk about the stats later, depending on what the condition is. Ted right now is prone, and you can see not only is there a little prone guy on the chart right here, there's also a prone icon right over here. He's kind of just lying on his side arm, I guess. That's not the most comfortable prone position, but hey, he wasn't trying to be prone. Or maybe he was, who knows? When you add a condition like this, by default, it's unlimited. It'll go on until you remove it. But you can add a turn count to it by, add 1 turn or add 5 turns, remove 5 turns. So you'll notice what happened right here. So add condition, prone, okay. Add turn, and it's got 1 turn. So when it comes around to Ted's turn, you notice it's still on. That's because conditions care about whose turn it is when they were added. Okay, and obviously a prone isn't a condition that's just going to stick around turn after turn. We'll look at some conditions that would. But when I go to Bob's turn, now it'll go away. Okay, that's the important thing to remember about turns on a condition. When you first add turns to a condition, it cares about whose turn it is currently when the condition's added. The reason for that is most conditions come from someone taking an action. Let's go look at the whole conditions dialog. So you go down here to other, and you notice you got a whole condition dialog. Here are all the standard traditional Pathfinder conditions, and you can also add conditions based on some other things, such as custom conditions if you want to add one. There's a favorites list right here where you can add and remove favorite conditions. But so on this list of conditions, some of these have effects, some of these don't. They've all got unique icons. You can choose a condition, you can add it, you can give it a duration if you want, or leave it as unlimited, which is the default. You can add any details, which is extra info. We're going to make this guy sickened for 4 turns. Ted is sickened for 4 turns, and you notice that when I look at the list of conditions now, sickened is on there because I used that condition recently. So let's just say Bob though. So Bob sickened Ted, and let's say Bob is going to do something to Kobold. So I go and I add condition. Let's say he's casting a spell. If you go to the spells here, you'll notice there are a large number of spells, and every once in a while you'll notice one. Let's see if I can find one, which has a star on it. That means that that spell has a bonus which the game is automatically going to apply. I can click this, click Fox Cunning, 1 round, add, and the Kobold I right-clicked on, which wasn't Kobold 1, it was 15, now has Fox's Cunning for 1 round. So if you go to the custom page, you can click new, and you notice you got this little box right here, and you can create your own new condition. You can add that. You can use any of these little icons that are in the program somewhere. These are just the other condition icons plus a few other random things that just were available. And you can click to add a bonus, and you can make a variety of different stats changes. I'm thinking we'll talk about stats later. So let's just say I want all saves to go up by 3. I can do that, and that's the happy condition. You'll notice Dave's happy condition sitting right here. It's great. And it's on Cobalt 15. We eventually run out of space for conditions. You'll rarely run out of space for conditions on the chart over here if anybody's got that many conditions on them, but you'll always have more, you'll always have the chance to have more space over here. So let's talk about some of the other actions that you can take. So we've got a little action menu. There are essentially 3 different edit options. Not sure why feats is an option, really. That's like something really old. I don't think I need that anymore because no one goes that way. Add condition, we just saw. So damage heal, okay? So this is a little box that allows you to damage a whole bunch of different characters at once. Basically, it's used for like if a bunch of characters have been hit by a fireball, you can type in 25, and if anybody's saved, you can do half for them, and then you can just damage them. You'll notice that several characters are dead now. We'll talk about dead characters in initiative in just a moment, but we'll also heal Ted back to alive. And Ted's alive again. So notes allows you to, gives you a little pop-up box that gives you notes on a character. This is a little color marker here which allows you to, there's not a lot going on right here with this right now. There's a special request for this one at one point. This just allows you to label a character specifically just for highlighting purposes. I should add some more colors. I don't know why there aren't more colors. Why aren't there more colors? Roll. We'll talk about roll when we talk about stats. Clone allows you to just duplicate a character. It just duplicates everything about that character, including the fact I just cloned Dead Alice. But you can also delete. A character's in part of your monster doesn't have to stay there. They can move around. You can bounce them around like this. This is important because anytime you add a monster from the DB, they always appear in monsters, but sometimes you want them in your party. So you can just drag and drop to your heart's content. So there are a couple more things you can do with the little character screen. The hit point button here allows you move hit points up and down in chunks however you like. So let's talk about dying. So if a character gets to 0 hit points, they get the disabled and staggered condition. So that's only precisely at 0. Okay, these conditions always appear. You can remove them if you want to, but they'll always appear. There may be some feats which prevent them from appearing. Once a character gets below 0, they start dying, and you'll notice a couple of icons here. One is dying and one is unconscious. You can right click on the dying icon and click stabilize, and the character will become stable. So now they are just unconscious. And if you get back to 0, they will get back to disabled, and if you get back up, they'll go back down. Eventually, if your character gets too low based on their current constitution modified, the character will be dead. A dead character, an unconscious character, they still get turns. So if you want a character who is dead or dying or unconscious or whatever to not get a turn, you should idle that character, and that'll remove them from the chart. So a dead character is not idled automatically. If you idle a character and they have other conditions applied to them other than dead, if they're poisoned or whatever, those conditions will still take down the appropriate number of turns. If you add a condition to a character who is idle, that condition will still tick down the appropriate number of turns. In addition to hit points, you also have temp hit points and non-lethal hit points. So let's bring Carol back to life here. So let's say she's got 5 temporary hit points. Okay. And I decide, if you click on the hit point box and you press enter, you'll get the damage box. So let's say I decide to do 3 points of damage to Carol. Let me go back. Those 3 points will have come off her temp hit points before they come off her regular hit points. Do this again. And you know she took 1 hit point of damage and she lost all of her temp. So let's say you do non-lethal damage to a character. Okay. Now I just did 5 points. Now these are kind of counting upwards. Okay, it's the amount of non-lethal damage a character has taken. And you'll notice that she is now staggered because she's at 5 and she's unconscious if her non-lethal exceeds the remaining hit points. And it's gone if I move it back to 0. So whenever a character takes damage, it always comes off the temp first, by the way. So you notice I press down here. All this is all considered to be taking damage. So only if I went over to the box here would it be different. So this is the little non-lethal temp pop-up box. The other box is the stats box. Now, we haven't talked about stats for a character yet. Every character has a base set of stats that they get automatically. You may have noticed over in the window that Carol over here has a character sheet, okay? You can basically see everything that comes on this chart, okay? A character without making any changes is CR1, a neutral medium humanoid. The initiative we already modified. But otherwise it would be initiative 0, perception 0, AC 10 for all of our ACs. We've kind of messed around with her hit points, but it would be hit points 5, 0 saves because she has 0 modifiers on everything. We can perform basic changes to this information right here. So there are 4 pages. So from the base page here, we can change the stats. We just see the speed. We have to go somewhere else to change it. We can change the alignment. We can change the type of the character, and we can change the size. So changing the size will change a couple of different modifiers you'll notice. So Combat Manager can do the rules for a number of simple different changes. So you'll notice that since I've changed her to large, she has a CMB of +1, a CMD of 11 instead of 10. And her AC has gone down by 1 because of -1 size, it says right here. This will also affect how weapons will go on later. So for combat here, we can just manually change any of her combat stats. Attacks, we can go into edit attacks. We'll deal with that in a little bit. And resources is a real simple tab. It's not really tied to stats of any kind, but let's just say we wanted to add, foods is available and 10. It'll just keep track of any numbers we want to keep track of. If that's a way that you like to keep track of something, that's just a little extra tool available to you right there. So that's kind of the basic chart. If this setup is too large for you, and you have a ton of monsters or party members or whatever, you can click mini here and it'll shrink down. It'll just have the most basic elements. One other thing to consider is that down at the bottom here, there's a clear button. And that will clear out everybody, and they're just all gone. So you probably won't want to clear out your players very much, but clearing out the monsters is something you like to do after every combat. When I'm running combat, I'm likely to, when a monster dies, I'm likely to remove it from combat right then. That will change the CR of the combat, but I just keep track of that at the beginning, so it's just something to consider. There's a couple of buttons up here, saving party and loading party. This just allows you to save the party to a file, just some random file, or to open up a file and to load a party. When you open, it always adds to the current list. It never removes the list. And parties are the same if they're monsters or if they're good guys. So you can move those around as you want to. If you want to save the entire state of everything in this view, now when the application closes and reopens, it will keep whatever your position is, it will keep the same position. But if you need to load or save, there's a load combat state and save combat state, and that saves the party, the monsters, the initiative window, and the current turn. And it saves all of that information. You notice down here we haven't, one panel we haven't talked about is the die roller. This is pretty straightforward. There are two modes for the die roller, fast and text. Fast, you just click a button and it just rolls a die and it just appears on the chart. We obviously have 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20, and 100. Text allows you to enter a text combination. So 4d6 plus 7, assuming it is valid. If you press enter or roll, it will roll. Little X button to clear stuff out. If you press one of the dice when in this mode, it'll add the dice to the string down here. It'll try and, as smartly as it can, make that string work. That's pretty straightforward. You notice a little dice right over here. This is important later on, but you can re-roll the same dice again. If you roll a 20, when you're rolling a d20, if you ever hit number 20, it'll highlight that for you. One more thing, if you click the open button, you can open up Hero Lab files and some exported PC Gen files. And they may or may not always import properly. Hero Lab files tend to import fairly well. PC Gen files tend to, you need to export the right type. There's never really been a right PC Gen export file because PC Gen stores the data in a way that's much more difficult to parse. But if you do this right, you can import both Hero Lab and PC Gen to some extent, and that's a good way to you can get files from your players, and so you can just have those stats right in there. If you want to edit the stats, let's add a monster here. Just okay. Here is an ogre. Okay. And we go into here and we've got 3 edit options, but there's only one I want to talk about right now, which is the monster editor. This is the big bad editor in the program. Okay. So in the monster editor, there are a couple of areas up near the top. On the top left, we have a block which gives you their name, their CR, the alignment size. We have types and subtypes, essentially. Types is a fixed list. Subtypes, you can enter whatever you want, although in some sense it's a fixed list. Below that, there's a string for senses. Senses kind of generally go in a certain format, so it's best not to mess this up too much. But we have initiative, we have a race, and we have class. You'll notice that the classes are listed right here. You can have multiple classes with some commas separating those. There are parts which are kind of smarter at handling the classes than others, but that's the basic. So race, class, the abilities over here. Modifiers will always change based on how these numbers change. They'll always change appropriately. So then we have a series of tabs which represent all the parts of the character sheet. Defense tab we've got our hit points, hit dice. So the hit dice brings up a little screen which allows you to very specifically modify the dice. If you're multi-classed, you might have different combination of hit dice. Most characters have one different kind of count of one different kind of die, but that's something to look at. You can just click add die and 1d4. There's also a blank here for the hit point mod field. So we have AC, touch, flat-footed. So these numbers can be modified individually, but other things, stats, could modify them. So you notice as I increase the dexterity, it notices the modifiers changed, and it'll change those numbers. Armor, dodge, natural, deflection, shield, these are modifier numbers. So let's say we make the armor 14. Suddenly the AC pops up, but the touch AC does not pop up. Saves down here. Also, obviously, let's say I modify the Constitution to 18. We'll notice the Fortitude save comes up. And we have 6 fields representing these 6 fields on the character sheet: defensive abilities, damage resistance, immunity, spell resistance, resist, if it resists something, and weakness. So DR has a list you can enter here. There's a variety of these things, but you can type your own. Otherwise, you should try and keep the formatting like it is on the character sheet, if at all possible, because that'll help stuff work somewhere down the line. A lot of stuff is based kind of internally on text of a character sheet and parsing the text of it, which is a little rough on the player, I admit, but it's just kind of how things have managed to succeed over these years. It's what makes it possible to do all these things without knowing, without having kind of complex rules information for some of this stuff. Offense tab. So we've got the movement speeds all sitting right here because they needed somewhere to sit. And then we have the attacks. Also, special attacks, spell-like abilities, spells known, and spells prepared. We'll get to the spells in just a moment. So attacks and attacks editor, you can manually edit these text, but you notice there's a big warning right here. So basically it says, manually edited attacks may not be properly interpreted by Combat Manager if formatted incorrectly. Additionally, some changes may be overridden by Combat Manager when monster statistics are adjusted. Just keep an eye on that. The better way to deal with attacks is in the attacks editor. So the attacks editor is a little bit weird, and this is kind of one of the more complex elements in terms of understanding. A character generally has a series of different combinations of melee weapons they could be using. And the goal over here is to represent those combinations. So right here you've got this guy, he's got a club and it's in his main hand. Okay, so let's say we want to give him some other weapons. Okay, so let's say add set. It's set number 2. I add weapon. There's a large number of weapons already on here. If your favorite weapon isn't shown, talk to me and I'll try to get some more weapons on here. Otherwise, just try to get something which matches your weapon and manually edit it later. So let's just say I want to give this guy a Morning Star. So you'll notice down here, it shows you his text, and it tells you Masterwork Club +4 or Morning Star +3. And this represents the kind of just individual weapon proficiencies and other things that determine what's going on. He has a shield, which is kind of let's find somebody without a shield. So for the edit attacks here, I've gone to one of these base characters who doesn't have anything going on with them. And so add set is add some combination of weapons, add weapon, and so we'll add a bayonet. Well, not bayonet's a different kind of weapon. And we'll add a club. So I add a second club, and now the second club is in the offhand, where the other one's in the main hand. For some weapons, you'll notice that those weapons require 2 hands. So the Great Axe requires 2 hands, takes 2 hands to use. And some weapons you can place in 1 hand or 2 hands. You click on the hand, you'll get a second hand on it, which may or may not make a difference. Now, you can start to add more weapons than is possible, and it won't care. It'll just assume that the person has more hands than you imagined. So let's say we want a second set. I add set, click on the set over here, and now I give them dagger, and now I add dagger. And you notice the options are longsword or dagger, dagger. I could also add just a set which was just plain dagger. So that gives me all three options. While I'm adding these weapons, I can also add special abilities to these weapons from a kind of small list. So in addition to the melee weapons, we have ranged weapons we can add. Ranged weapons, they don't come in sets. They just come individually and just have their own individual numbers as is the rules. So I just need to go through here, find the ranged weapon that I want to add it here, and we will have a ranged weapon. And the numbers will just appear down here. So right here, there are some bonuses I can add. BRK means the weapon is broken. And 0 is just the normal. Masterwork makes it a masterwork weapon. And all of these +1 through +9 are magic item bonuses. Additionally, I can click on any of these bonuses and add any combination. So now I have a +3 Holy Light crossbow. Now, I can also add natural attacks. And this gets a little weird with melee weapons, but when we go to natural attacks, we find one. Each natural attack kind of has a basic amount of damage it does for its size. This is an important thing with all the weapons. All the weapon damages are for the appropriate size for the current character. And if the size of the character changes, the weapon damage will change. So I'll choose a hoof. I'll add a hoof. And you notice this creates combinations with the weapons over here. This can actually make the block really long if you have multiple weapon sets and multiple natural weapons. So when we click OK, we'll notice, and click OK again, and we notice that Alice now has all of her weapons and all of her stuff over here. So back in the monster editor again. So that is the weapons editor. Special attacks, spell-like abilities, spell knowns, and spell prepared are a little bit complicated to do manually. You can add the text there yourself, but you're going to find you need to hit the formatting of the books fairly right in order for that to work. I'm working on some stuff to make that a little better in the future. Statistics, it's kind of a generic throw-all page for some other stuff. But here you have the skills, so you can add a skill with an appropriate subtype as need be. So let's say that you can craft, you can type whatever you craft here, you can select from the drop down, craft shoes, you can add a modifier. These numbers will modify based on your ability scores as well. We have base attack, combat maneuver bonus, combat maneuver defense. Those are just there just because we ran out of space on the other page. Racial modifiers are languages, special qualities, gear, and other gear. These fields, for the most part, you don't need to worry too much about getting right. There's not too much there's not really nothing relying on them. Feats is kind of a page where you can just click a feat and add a feat, and you can also add any information related to what that feat is related to right here. Some feats will have stat changes associated with them. Some will not. So some kind of the older, simpler feats are likely to have rules associated with them. Special abilities, you can click add a special ability, give it a name. Thinking. You've got three types of thing here, or you can choose nothing, and then you can just type some text right here. And that's pretty straightforward what a special ability is. Because of that, you don't need to worry too much about the formatting of your special abilities. A description is just your basic descriptive information. So if you're, these are all of the descriptive information stuff I pulled from all the characters. So if you like being in warm hills and marshes, if you like to organize in groups of 10, And it just any notes on what kind of treasure. Normal is a normal word for treasure. Information about what you do before and after and during combat. These are mostly just fields straight from the book. Visual description, mean. Description, real mean. Morale runs pretty quick. Finally, in the other page, we have just some other information I couldn't really fit anywhere. Prohibited schools, bloodline, and spell domains. So once you have some good stat information, there are some things you can do kind of on an advanced level in here. So a character can roll, and you can roll attacks. Well, I got no attacks, I'm sorry. Got somebody with some attacks. So roll attacks, and you'll notice all of the attack options are there. So let's see, light crossbow. Now if I just roll it this way, it'll tell me the number rolled, +3 to hit, 21 is the total, 18 was the original number, and the damage rolled, if it's a hit, is a 10. I'm wondering if we can just roll enough times. The color will slightly change if it's a potential critical based on the information, and it will roll the potential critical hit and the potential critical damage. So we have save rolls, and you notice once again the little dice right here just allows you to roll that roll again. So if you want to re-roll whatever was just rolled. We have skill rolls for all of your skills. We have, it'll let you roll it even if you normally wouldn't be able to roll it. Whether or not, it doesn't really care whether that's learned or unearned. If you decide to roll it, you get to roll it. Combat maneuver checks for the various different combat maneuvers. And ability checks, just raw, straight up ability checks. So here's an example right here of a critical hit roll. You'll notice that that -4 hit, so it tells me it is a 16, but she rolled a 20, and damage 3. And you'll notice the crit roll is shown right here. Crit roll is 11 on a roll of a 15, and damage 4. One other little note on this page, just we talked about the monster DB right here. There's a field right here which allows you monsters. So monsters represents things in the bestiary. NPCs represent anything that comes from something other than a bestiary. And custom represents custom monsters, which we'll talk about in the future. All is the default. Also, there's this little checkbox right here, which is a little indulgence of mine, which is roll monster HP. I've always liked having kind of random monsters, and if you would like, when a monster is added to combat, to have their hit points be randomized based on their hit dice, you can turn on this checkbox. But you know, that's kind of up to you. There are a few settings you can look at in the application. So if you want confirmation on various actions, you can come in here in settings. If you want to split out the damage dice, which will make your dice roller larger, but some people may like it more, you can click show damage dice. If you want monsters, to be added hidden, we'll talk about hidden in just a sec. Or if you want to show hidden initiative values, you can click here. If you want the stats panel to begin open, which will make things seem much bigger, you can click here. One other wacky roll is you can roll alternate dice for D20 rolls, and you can just punch in what you want here. Somebody wanted 3d6 ones, which is why this is here. So let's talk about last the initiative window. So up on the little button, we have a show initiative window. This is a little pop-up that appears. You can drag it to another monitor or drag it back here. And this is something to put on another screen to show your players. It shows you all of the players and monsters involved, and it tells you whose turn it is in a couple of different ways. And it can also show you any conditions that are applied to them. You can click this little tab that's hanging up right there, in kind of a weird spot for reasons, and you can flip the thing upside down or scale it around as you need to. Plus, you can also resize the window then. And you have yourself a nice little window to show the players. Now, oftentimes you don't want them to see some of this information. So you do have the option to, well, you can hide the names of the players, that's just plain weird. But you can hide the monsters, which means that when their turn comes up, you'll just get some question marks and you'll just know that somebody else's turn is going on. That does kind of give you an idea of how many monsters there are, but that's usually not that much of a problem. Or you can just hide the names of the monsters such that they know there's somebody. You can also always on top this if you want it there. You can turn on or off the conditions and change the size of those conditions display. So it just depends on whether or not you want the players to see the conditions. Oftentimes you'll want to show the monsters that the players know about. So one thing you can do is hide characters. This is something we've talked about a whole bunch we never really got to. So what this does is it completely removes the character from the chart as if they were hidden. When the turn comes up, there's a question mark, which will give the players a little tiny hint, but the fact that you're putzing around will probably give them a large hint as well. If you want them to be completely hidden, completely not come up at all, you can hide and idle them, which will remove them from the chart. If you would want, you could use that to have them take turns without them knowing completely, but it'll require you to track things more manually in that regard, because you'll just have to say, well, it's Bob's turn. I'm going to look at who's next after Bob and have them take their turns, then click next. But it's not actually that unreasonable. But that is the initiative window to show to your players. So these were all the basic functions of Combat Manager that we've run through here. There are a lot more things that go on in Combat Manager, and most of them from this point aren't directly related to combat. But that's how you use all of the combat features. And so anyway, that's all for right now, and I hope this video has been helpful to you, and will help you get your way through Combat Manager a little bit more.